God's desire for your life is that you would make His Word your standard of living.
The basis of all truth is God's holy word. We invite you to join the Beulah Baptist Church in Bennett, North Carolina for Truth for Today with Dr. Neal Jackson. Dr. Jackson's verse-by-verse preaching will encourage you in your journey of life and answer your greatest questions from God's Word. So open your Bible and your heart to hear Truth for Today.
We come to Genesis 13, looking at the story of Lot, and we learn from his first-hand experience some things that he did that we should not do. This morning, 5 tragic mistakes Lot made in parenting. Sermon is entitled, Fatal Flaws Fathers Frequently Fall For. The first fatal flaw. Lot abandoned worship. Genesis 13, notice verse 10. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now remember, they're at Bethel. Look up at verse 3. And he went on his journey from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Adam called on the name of the Lord. So to look to Sodom as Lot was doing, he had to turn his back on Bethel. Backsliding begins when you turn your back on God, when you turn away from worshiping God. That's what Lot did. We're going to look at Lot's tragic mistakes. Understand, it all began when he turned his back on personal and public worship. You say, well, what did they do at Bethel? Bethel was a place of personal worship. It's where they heard from God. Psalm 119, verse 97. Oh, how I love thy law. It is my meditation all the day long. How is your personal worship with God? If you're not worshiping and communing with God every day, you are backslid. You have turned your back on God. It is a big deal. You're headed toward destruction. There was a place of personal worship. It was a place of prayer. It's where they talked with God. Luke 18, verse 1 says, men ought always to pray and not to faint. So my question for you this morning, how is your prayer life? What else did they do at Bethel? It was the place of corporate worship, where they would bring their families to worship God. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So is your corporate worship a must-do event on your calendar? Or is it if we get around to it, we're going to worship corporately? Bethel was a place of sacrifice, where they would sacrifice for God. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9. Honor the Lord with thy substance, with the firstfruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty. Thy presses shall burst out with new wine. So does God have a priority in your checkbook? Have you turned your back on God by not listening to Him, by not communing with Him, by not worshiping Him corporately, by not giving to Him? You need today to come back to Bethel. God should be the number one priority in your life. God is more important than ball. God is more important than your hobbies. God is more important than your job. God should be number one on your list to do. He should be first when you get up in the morning. He should be first in your checkbook. Your children should know, hey, we worship God. Lot's downfall began when he abandoned worship. Second mistake Lot made, he acquiesced to compromise. Verse 10, notice. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Notice this. Even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. So Lot looks towards Sodom and he says, hey, it's like the garden of the Lord. It's like the Garden of Eden, and it's like Egypt. Wait a minute. You could not have any more polar opposites than the garden of the Lord, the garden of Egypt, the garden of Eden, and Egypt. See, Lot was compromising. He wanted to hold God in one hand, hold the world in another. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, Jesus says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, he will hold the one, despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So that's what Lot was doing. He was trying to combine them all. Look at Genesis 13, verse 11. Then Lot chose, notice that word, him, all the plain of Jordan. And Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from another. He made this decision based upon himself, not based upon his family's well-being, not based upon the well-being of his uncle Abraham, not based upon God's will. He chose him. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. It was all about Lot. And his family suffered. Dad, do you realize your priority for leading your family is not what you want to do? It's not, well, this is what I like, and this is what makes me happy. You were to go before the Lord and say, God, in this situation, what would you have me to do? Lot acquiesced to compromise. Look at verse 12. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain. And notice this, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. It means he stretched his tent toward Sodom. He had turned his back on Bethel, and now he's looking and he's eyeing Sodom. He's moving more in that direction. Now, he's not planning to move to Sodom. He just wanted to enjoy the benefits of Sodom. Just live out there in the suburbs so my family, they can benefit from those good schools, so my wife can benefit from those good malls. We're just going to live in the suburbs. Many Christians are just like that. Hey, we're not going to go into gross wickedness and evil, but it's not that bad. Well, it's not that wrong. Well, it's not that wicked, and it's compromise. Lot says, hey, it's not that bad. Hold on a second. Look at verse 13. Look what God says about Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord. Notice the last word, exceedingly. So Lot says, it's not that bad. And God says it's wicked big time. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against your soul. Dad, some of you need to come home and take control of your television. Do you realize what goes on your television screen? And you're just saying, well, it's not that bad. It is bad. The average child watches 4 hours of TV a day. By the time they're 18, they will have seen 25,000 hours of television. My thought was, if these kids have watched 25,000 hours of television, how many hours have they seen their daddy reading the Bible to them? 25,000 hours of television. By the time a kid turns 18, he will have seen 200,000 acts of violence, 40,000 murders, 20,000 sexual situations, 80% of those between people who are not married. Now, Hollywood says, oh, that's all right. That's normal. God says, that is exceedingly wicked, and it's wrong. Number 3, Lot was apathetic toward correction. Now, you're in chapter 13. I want you to turn over a page and look at chapter 14. Verse 11. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way, and they took Lot, Abraham's brother's son. Notice the next phrase. Who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Do you realize it was 48 miles from Bethel to Sodom? You don't just fall into sin. You deliberately choose to go in sin when you start compromising. So Lot wakes up and he is living in Sodom. These kings come and they capture Lot. They capture his family. They capture him. They take him away. Look down at verse 14. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them and pursued them unto Haba, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought back again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So Abraham, with 318 of his servants, goes and he rescues Sodom, and he rescues Lot. You would think that Lot would wake up. You would think after almost losing everything that he would say, hey, Uncle Abraham, I will make my servants subservient to your servants. Can I come back and live with you? Not a Lot. Lot says, no. Shoo, that was a close one. Thanks, Uncle Abe. We needed you to bail out Sodom. We're going back and living hard and heartily in Sodom, to the detriment of his family. He was apathetic to correction. Do you understand Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6? For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourges, notice the next two words, every son whom he receiveth. So if you are God's child and you are living in sin, God will chasten you. God will scourge you to bring you back. So many families, I see it all the time. They're being chastened. I mean, just everything in their life is going wrong. And it's one thing, godly people will suffer persecution. But when you're not living for God, when you're not living for right, and you're facing persecution, it's a time to examine yourself. Is there sin in my life? Fourth mistake Lot made. He abused his family. You're in Genesis 14. Turn over to Genesis 19. He abused his family. You say, preacher, how did Lot abuse his family? Genesis 19, verse 1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even. Notice the next phrase. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Sitting in the gate meant he was an elected official. Sitting in the gate meant more than likely he was a mayor. He was a judge. He was even possibly the governor of Sodom. Wait a minute. How do you go from worshiping God to being elected in a God-forsaken, wicked, pagan world? How do you make that jump? Turning your back on worship. Not worshiping God publicly and personally. It's just allowing compromise to come into your life. You know, it took a lot of effort to be elected. Took a lot of shaking of hands to be elected. Took a lot of kissing babies to be elected. He had to work and work and work and work and work and work to be elected as an outsider in a godless society. You read the story of Lot. You see where his work is mentioned. You never see where his family worship is mentioned. You read the story of Lot and you see where his wealth is mentioned. You never see where Lot is taking time to train and instruct his children. You read the story of Lot and you see about his worldly relationships. You never discover Lot's priorities in his family. He abused his family by his work and his lack of priorities. Secondly, he abused his family by his wrong choices. He made wrong choices. You say, what kind of choices? Choice where to live. Parents, God has put you in the life of your children to protect them from bad influences. Lot didn't do this with his family. Look at Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. There came two angels to Sodom at even. Lot sat in the gate at Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground, and he said, Behold, now my lords, turn in. I pray thee into your servant's house and tarry all night and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. What is verse 3? And he pressed upon them greatly. No. You can't stay in the street. This is not a safe place. No. You can't stay in the street. Not in Sodom. Wait a minute. If angels can't stay in the street, Why are you leaving your family there? Get them out. Look on in the verse. And they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, notice this, even the men of Sodom, it says it twice, compassed the house around, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, and they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after them. So the angels come in there. They say, hey, send these men out because we want to abuse them sexually. Lot goes out. Wait a minute. Why is Lot even living in a city like that? Why is Lot allowing his family to be corrupted in that city? He's not protecting his family. So he goes out to talk to the city, the men, even the men, the young and the old, people from all the quarters. How is Lot going to respond? Look back at the verse. Lot went out, verse 6, at the door unto them and shut the door after him, verse 7, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. I pray you, brethren. Now come on, boys. Come on, boys. Let's not be naughty. Now y'all just be nice. Wait a minute. These people are coming to abuse your guest, and you're coming out and saying, hey, boys, now y'all be nice. Where's his backbone? Where's his say, no, you're not going to mess with these guys or we're going to tangle. Lot has no backbone. He left it in Bethel when he turned his back on God. Look at verse 8. Behold now, I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. And I read that verse and I'm thinking, Lot, what are you thinking, man? He's not. When you're living in sin, you're not thinking. When you're living in sin, you're not protecting your family. When I read that story, it's like, Lot, you're not protecting your family. And I come to you guys, and I say there are many men in this auditorium, you're not protecting your family either. You're not protecting them against the perversion of society. They're coming every day into your living room on that television, and you're just saying, brethren, now y'all be nice. Brethren. And I'm thinking, hey, this is your family. Protect your family. Lot abused his family. Number 5, Lot abdicated his authority. He abdicated his authority. You say, what authority? You're in chapter 19. I want you to go back. I'm going to back up in the story and then we'll come back forward. Go back to chapter 18. These 2 angels that came to visit Lot in Sodom, before they came to see Lot, they go to see Abraham. Genesis 18, verse 22. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom. So they're leaving Abraham. They're headed down to see Lot. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. So Abraham's going and he's standing before the Lord. He's saying, God, I don't like what's going on in my world. You got to do something. You never read of Lot going to stand before the Lord. World is falling apart. Lot's not standing before the Lord. And that's where some of our fathers are. Man, the devil is just unloading on your family, on your marriage, on your children. And you're not standing before the Lord. You're saying, well, I just don't like this. Well, I wish something else would happen. What are you doing about it? Are you standing before the Lord? Look on. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord, verse 23, and Abraham drew near. He says, hey, I got problems in my world. I got problems in my family. I'm going to get close to God because that is the answer. And it's your answer as well. Look on. And said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous and the wicked? Verse 24, peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? So Abraham goes and he's talking with God, bartering God, spare Sodom for 50, for 40, for 30, for 20, for 10. Abraham is going standing before the Lord. Abraham is going pleading for Sodom. Where's Lot? Lot is nowhere to be found. Lot is partying hard, enjoying the pleasures of life while his community is dying and going to hell. And pardon me, that's where some of our dads are. The world is dying. Our community is dying. Your family is dying. And you say, oh, but we're having fun. Oh, but we're making a lot of money. And your world is dying. And it's your fault. He abdicated his authority with God. Secondly, he abdicated his authority with his family. So we're back in Genesis chapter 19. The two angels tell Lot, God is going to destroy this city. Get all of your family out of here. Genesis 19, verse 14. Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughter, and said, Up. The first bit of energy I see in Lot. Up! Get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. Can you see his eyes? It's serious now. Get up, get out of here. Notice the last phrase. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. Dad, you been drinking again? You saw two angels? Dad, come on, just sleep it off. It seemed as one who mocked because they had never seen a spiritual side of their father-in-law. And some of your kids have never seen your spiritual side, Dad, because you don't talk to them about spiritual things. You don't lead them spiritual. You don't go into them and say, hey, I've been with God, and this is what God says we're to do. They never see that side of you. Look at verse 15. When the morning arose, then the angels, notice this, hastened Lot. Wait a minute. Their city is getting ready to be destroyed, and they're having to pull you out of the city because you're so attached to worldliness, saying, Arise, take thy wife, thy two daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Verse 16. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife and upon the hands of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful unto them, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. They literally had to drag Lot out of the city because he's so attached to worldliness. And some of you, that's exactly where you are. You're so attached to the things of the world and not to the things of God. Let me be pulled away from my Bible. Let me be pulled away from my prayer time. Don't make me, we got to pull them away from ball, or we got to pull them away from their hobbies, or we got to pull them away from television. Dude, take it. But don't take my Jesus. Don't take my Bible. Don't take my prayer time. Look at verse 24. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the city and that which grew upon the ground. Verse 26. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. You look back up at verse 17. She was clearly forbidden. Don't look back. And she did. And you say, why did she do that? If she was clearly told, don't look back, why did she look back? My opinion is this. She wasn't used to having a spiritual authority in her life. She wasn't used to someone leading her spiritually. So when someone led her spiritually and she didn't like it, she said, no, I'm just going to do my own thing. She didn't have a spiritual leader in her life. So therefore, when the money came to crunch, she didn't listen to spiritual authority. Look on, verse 27. And Abram got up early in the morning. Notice this phrase. To the place where he stood before the Lord. Dad, do you have a place? Do you have a place where you go before the Lord, where you go and just commune with the Lord, where you go and you hear from the Lord? Your kids need it. Your wife needs it. Your community needs it. Problem is, some of you are just like Lot, and spiritually, You're a big zero. Look on in the verse. The place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and beheld. And lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. Can you see Abraham as he looks down at his community? And he sees the smoke from the destruction. Don't you know that Lot was at another location and he was looking down at the same city and the same smoke? There was a big difference. Abram can say, I did everything I could to save my city. Lot couldn't. How about you? Can you say, you know what, I'm doing everything I possibly can for this community. I'm doing everything I possibly can for my kids, for my wife, for my family? Or are you a contributor to its wickedness? Now, I love what happens. Verse 29 is a commentary. Why did this happen? Why did God destroy Sodom? Why did God save Lot? Why did God save Lot's family? You want to know? Verse 29. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham. And he sent Lot out of the midst of the overflow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. Because he had an uncle that was a praying man, God spared his life. Wonder if your nieces and nephews have a godly uncle. Wonder if your grandkids have a godly grandparent. Wonder if your kids have a godly parent. That God is going to spare their life, not because they deserve it. For you, because you're drawing near to God, because you're standing before the Lord.
Thank you for joining us this week for Truth for Today. Our prayer is that God's Word has ministered to your deepest need and answered many of your questions about life. Truth for Today is only able to stay on the air through the financial support of God's people. Would you consider partnering with us to take the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world? You may mail your gifts to Truth for Today, P.O. Box 104, Bennett, North Carolina, 27208. Please include the call letters of this station when you write. If you'd like to receive a copy of today's message, please request this sermon with your donation of any amount. If you'd like to donate by credit card, you may call 336-581-3170. Be assured that God's Word has the answer for your every need, and join us next week for Truth for Today. Help for the Hurting is Dr. Jackson's new 5-part audio sermon series to encourage you in the journey of life. This series will motivate and encourage you to keep fighting the good fight of faith in spite of your circumstances, as tough as they may be. For your gift of $50 or more, we will send you this new series entitled Help for the Hurting, and you'll be partnering with us as we seek to take the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ to the ends of the earth.